Coming up on Sci News Tonight, Pluto, planet or can it? Two leading scientists give us some insight into the hot and cold debate that's been shaking up the interstellar community. What exactly is our farthest little friend? Next up on Sci News.
Sci News Tonight, bringing you the reactions to every action.
Hello, scientists, students, and those who just like to know what's out there, and welcome to Sci News Tonight. I'm your host, Alec Trons. The decisions of how we organize what we see in the night sky have always been fairly unanimous amongst the scientific community, but over the past few years, one little friend has caused a lot of conversation. Pluto, long considered the smallest and farthest planet in our solar system, has been officially demoted from that status since 2006.
Here to explain the situation and present the still ongoing debate on Pluto's planetary status are two people with a lot of stargazing under their belts.
Over here, she's a member of NASA's New Horizons team, astrophysicist and atmospheric scientist Mary Dean.
Good evening.
And right over there, a member of the International Astronomers Union who voted for the most recent classification system for planets, renowned astronomer Kara Bond.
It's a pleasure to be here today, Alec.
So, Kara, I'm sure the people at home are wondering, what is the whole debate over whether Pluto is a planet or not? I mean, for many people, it's always been a planet, and the taking away of that title seems kind of pointless. Why change the system?
Well, you see, the importance of defining Pluto as a planet or otherwise isn't important because it's Pluto. It's important because of the precedent it sets for other celestial bodies that we might find in the future. At the time of its discovery in 1930, in fact, Pluto was one of the smallest objects we'd found in the sky. It was still a planet then, because we didn't have any evidence for objects of close to comparable size in the area, and it made sense with everything else that we had up to that point. Then in the 90s, we began to discover objects in the area around Pluto that were close to it in size and composition, culminating in the discovery of Eris in 2005. And Eris was even farther from our sun, and it's calculated at being about 100 miles wider than Pluto.
Which, considering Pluto's only about 1,500 miles wide, is for once actually significant, considering 100 miles is normally nothing in the night sky.
Right. Obviously, this did cause a lot of hullabaloo in the scientific community about what was and what was not able to be considered a planet. We had to have a formal discussion about planethood after that, and that was the 26th General Assembly of the International Astronomical Union in 2006. The astronomers on the committee, of course including myself, sat down to define once and for all what was a planet. And let me tell you, it was not an easy job. Nothing like a stuffy room in Prague in August, full of professional nerds arguing.
I can hear the passive-aggressive comments now. Yeah. While my esteemed colleague surely believes in his statement, the data shows us.
Oh, that was more on point than I think you were going for, Alec. Anyway, it took most of the 11 days of the assembly for us to finally find something that we agreed on. We had three major definitions that crossed the table. One that allowed for Pluto and other objects like Eris to be planets, giving us about 12 planets at the time, and who knows how many now. One that kept Pluto a planet, but not Eris or anything else, which kept us at 9. And one that took Pluto off the planet list for a total of 8 quote-unquote true planets. The last one is a definition we eventually settled on, and that consists of three fairly simple criteria. First, of course, an object has to be in orbit around the sun. Now, for this one, we have to qualify. We're talking about planets in our solar system. There could be objects circling Alpha Centauri that are perfectly suited as planets, but I mean, that's not the point of this discussion, so our sun, it has to be. Pluto orbits our sun. Yes, so...
One point to planet Pluto!
Yes, 1 point to planet Pluto, that's correct. The second criterion is that the object's gotta have enough gravity to pull itself into a spherical shape. No pyramid planets. Not now. But maybe someday.
Pluto is quite round as well, so that's another point for planethood. It sounds like maybe you decided it was a planet after all at this rate. Did the announcements just go out with the wrong box checked?
Well, not quite, because it's the third one that gets it. To qualify as a planet, an object has to have cleared its neighborhood. And by that we mean it's got to be by far the biggest thing in this area. I mean, you see, as planets form, they become the dominant gravitational body in their orbit. As they crash into and interact with other nearby objects, they either consume them and take their mass, or push them far away with their gravity. A planet is basically the big dog in the area, and all the other objects know it. Now, Pluto is only 700th times the mass of the other objects in its orbit, which isn't enough to consider the area cleared. To put that into perspective, Earth has 1.7 million times the mass of the other objects in its orbit. Nothing's challenging the Earth as a planet itself.
So you're saying it's not exactly Pluto's size that disqualifies it, it's the fact that it's not alone in its local sky.
Yep, exactly. That's right. Eris isn't a planet either, or anything else in that corner of the solar system. They're all surrounded by objects in what we've come to call the Kuiper Belt, and nothing's ruling the coup. So the classification we give to those objects that meet the first two criteria, but not the third, is a dwarf planet. And that's what Pluto is. So it's kind of a, lesser planet, maybe tier 2?
A baby planet.
Exactly. That is one way of looking at it, yes. And until it cleans up its room and either absorbs or pushes away the other things in the area, it doesn't get to be a grown-up planet.
Alright, so Pluto doesn't meet the set criteria because it's got too many friends too close by to be a planet. That sounds reasonable enough, Mary, doesn't it? Why all the backlash against the decision?
Well, first of all, despite what you might think about the profession, there actually are more astronomers that can fit in a stuffy room in Prague in August. One of the biggest reasons for the outcry at the time was that it was made by so few people. Most of the scientific community didn't actually support it, but they weren't in attendance because, we were busy being scientists.
We? Implying that I wasn't?
No, implying you were between studies at the moment. Kara, keep up with your work.
Thank you.
Anyways, only about 4% of the recognized astronomical community who've been there for the rest of the assembly was present at the actual final vote on the resolution. So most of us didn't get much of a say in what happened. Mm-hmm. The initial resolution of the committee, drafted by Owen Gingerich, actually used the other definition you mentioned on the raising the current number of planets to 12. That was using a very geological based definition of planethood, and some people, like Gingerich himself, think that it was dissatisfaction with the type of definition that led to such strong opposition. People who felt strongly against the definition might have been more likely to stick around and argue against it, while those who agreed might not have felt such the need.
So it's like in politics. It's always easier to get people to vote against something they hate than for something they like.
Oh, I saw where you were going with that.
Yeah, the human instinct for opposition. So that's one reason for the outcry in the scientific community. Another argument is that the definition of what is the neighborhood for a planet is nebulous, to the point that the third criterion may or may not be unevenly applied to discriminate against Pluto. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Neptune all have some sort of objects in their orbital zones. In fact, Neptune's orbital zone actually contains Pluto itself, where the orbits overlap. If Neptune had cleared its neighborhood, we wouldn't have had a Pluto to be debating the planethood of. So the criteria is a
well, it's not a constant part of its neighborhood, forgive me for interrupting, and the size difference between the other planets and their objects is a lot different than Pluto's situation.
Oh, potato. It's iffy science. According to some people, so that's another reason scientists people aren't so happy with. Now, the interesting thing is the outcry from the general public. The demotion of Pluto from planetary status was treated with a level of outrage that no one was expecting. People almost seemed to take it personally, like the 9-planet system was something inherently sacred. They even made a new word out of it, Plutoed.
Plutoed? Can't say I've heard it before.
I'm surprised. It was voted the 2006 word of the year. It means to demote or devalue someone or something. Yeah, pretty accurate to what happened to Pluto. Clearly the public felt it was arbitrarily taken away from the list of planets, and there's been a few petitions to reverse the decision and reinstate it with a lot of support. It messed with a lot of people.
I can imagine astrologers were pretty outraged.
I'm sure they were. Now, Mary, you're part of the New Horizons team that sent a mission out in early 2006 to take more pictures of our Plutoed Pluto. Wow, that's kind of fun to say. And it's closing in on the end of its transmission period. What's that been like?
Well, of what I can tell you. It's been a blast. The mission lead, Alan Stern, is actually one of the biggest detractors against the science behind the third criterion. So, small wonders that one of the goals of the mission was to try to find evidence to prove the debate one way or another. We have a lot of geologists, climatologists on the team, people you don't always have studying on this kind of astronomical mission. And one of the interesting things we've found in the pictures that have come back is that Pluto is covered in an extremely bright low-altitude limb haze.
Yes, I, of course, know exactly what that is. But can you put that in terms people at home without a PhD might understand?
Yeah, in simpler words, Pluto has possible clouds on its surface, like made of the gases expected from the atmosphere, nitrogen, methane, etc. And with the clouds comes weather patterns shifting in the haze, and that could change the ball game. Nothing else in the area has that kind of atmosphere that we've seen, not even Eris. So it provides another argument for calling for Pluto to be reinstated as a planet. Having cloudy days is ironically brightening Pluto's future.
You know what? I've heard those reports, and I'm very interested to see what those weather patterns amount to. And it's not as if, under the current criteria, Pluto couldn't regain its status. If it ever managed to clear out the neighborhood and stand tall, it could very easily be promoted back to a planet, especially with all the public support the idea already has.
Well, I think that's a nice note of optimism to end today's shortcast with, I think. Well, listeners, you've heard both sides of the debate. How do you feel about Pluto? Has our ninth planet been unfairly demoted, or was the change to the system a necessary move? Post your thoughts on social media. Hashtag SciNewsTonight. Also, tune in next week when we tackle one of the biggest unsolved mysteries of space, dark energy. I'm your host, Electrons. As usual, this is Mary Dean and Cara Bond, and we're signing off. Go find what's out there for yourself.